My family abandoned me on the day of our €14,200 European vacation, leaving for the airport without me because I was moody. So, I used my master booking access to cancel every single non-refundable reservation while they were mid-flight. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence in the house was the first thing that felt wrong. It was 6:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, the morning we were supposed to depart for a 3-week, meticulously planned tour across Italy and France to celebrate my father Roman's retirement. I had been awake for most of the night, battling a vicious, blinding migraine, the direct result of working 60-hour weeks at my logistics firm for the past 6 months just to afford the deposits for this trip. My temples throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache as I pushed the heavy comforter off my legs and swung my feet onto the cold hardwood floor. "Dad," I called out, my voice raspy and weak. No answer. Usually, Roman was an early riser, clattering around the kitchen, brewing his dark roast coffee and humming off-key. Today, there was nothing. Not the hum of the refrigerator, not the sound of dragging suitcases. Just an empty, heavy stillness. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, squinting against the harsh glare of the screen. There were no missed calls, no alarms, just a single text message from my father sent at 4:30 a.m. "We thought you backed out. You've been so moody lately, Clara. It's better if you just rest at home. We'll take lots of pictures for you." My breath hitched in my throat. I read the words again. And then a third time. My brain, clouded by the lingering fog of the migraine, struggled to process the sheer audacity of the text. Backed out. I had spent 9 months coordinating every flight, every private transfer, every 5-star boutique hotel. I had fronted the €14,200 on my corporate credit card, with the agreement that they would pay me back their shares over the next year. Panic and nausea warring in my stomach, I stumbled out of my bedroom and down the hallway. Their bedroom doors were wide open. The beds were made. The closets were half empty. The scent of Mia's expensive, sickeningly sweet floral perfume still lingered in the air. I made my way to the kitchen, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. There, sitting perfectly square in the middle of the kitchen island, was the master itinerary I had painstakingly printed out and bound in a leather folder the night before. Resting right on top of it was a bright pink sticky note. It wasn't addressed to me. It was a note my sister, Mia, had clearly written for the friend who was coming over to water the plants later that week. It read, "Off to Paris. Don't forget to water the orchids." Clara decided to stay behind and be a Grinch. She's gonna flip when she sees the photos on my feed. Cheers, Mia and Caleb. I stood there, barefoot in the quiet kitchen, staring at the cheerful loop of my younger sister's handwriting. My chest tightened until it felt like my ribs were going to snap. I had sacrificed my savings, my sleep, and my sanity to give my father the retirement trip of a lifetime, and they had simply sneaked out into the early morning darkness, leaving me behind like forgotten luggage. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. For a long time, I didn't move. The pink sticky note seemed to burn brightly against the dark leather of the itinerary folder. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I opened my messaging app and stared at Roman's text. "You've been so moody lately." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type out a furious, 1,000-word essay demanding to know how he could let Mia manipulate him into abandoning his eldest daughter, the one who was entirely funding his celebration. Instead, I tapped his contact and pressed call. The phone rang 4 times. I could hear the automated voice of an airport terminal making an announcement in the background before the line clicked open. "Clara," Roman said. His voice was hushed, carrying that specific tone of forced gentleness he always used when he knew he was in the wrong but desperately wanted to avoid an argument. "Honey, you're awake? Are you feeling any better? Your head." "You left without me," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was entirely stripped of emotion, hollowed out by the sheer shock of the moment. Now, sweetheart, don't use that tone, Roman sighed, the sound crackling over the phone speaker. We didn't leave you. You were in your room all evening yesterday with a headache. Mia pointed out that you've been so stressed and snappy for weeks. We didn't want to force you onto a 10-hour flight when you were clearly miserable. We made a judgment call. A judgment call? I repeated, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. Dad, I planned this entire trip. I paid for it. My luggage was packed and sitting by the front door. Well, Caleb moved your bags back into the hallway so we wouldn't trip over them in the dark, Roman deflected quickly. Look, Clara, Mia just wanted everything to be perfect. You know how she is. She has all her outfits planned, she has her brand deals for the trip. She was worried your energy would bring the mood down. You have been a bit of a dark cloud lately. In the background, I heard a sharp, familiar laugh. It was Caleb, Mia's pretentious boyfriend, a self-proclaimed visual artist who hadn't held a steady job in 3 years. Is Mia there? I asked quietly. She's getting us coffees before we board, Roman said, a hint of nervousness bleeding into his voice. Clara, please don't be angry. We'll bring you back something lovely from Florence. Just take this time to relax. You need a break. We're boarding in 20 minutes. He didn't even apologize. He was letting a 24-year-old aspiring influencer dictate our family dynamic, just as he always had since our mother passed. Mia wanted an aesthetic, perfectly curated, stress-free trip for her Instagram feed, and my exhaustion didn't fit her brand. Have a good flight, Dad, I whispered, and hung up the phone before he could say another word. I looked back down at the itinerary on the counter. Beside it lay my open laptop. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought they had secured a free, luxurious European vacation while neatly cutting out the moody financial backer who made it all possible. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. To understand how easily Roman folded to Mia's demands, you have to understand the dynamic that had defined our family for the last decade. When Roman had a minor heart attack 2 years ago, it wasn't Mia who sat by his hospital bed for 5 nights straight. It was me. When he needed to downsize his house and manage the overwhelming paperwork of his early retirement, it wasn't Caleb who organized the estate sale. It was me. I was the reliable one, the logistics coordinator, the daughter who handled the messy, unglamorous realities of life. Mia, on the other hand, was the golden child, preserved perfectly in a bubble of willful ignorance and entitlement. At 24, she possessed a polished, flawless exterior that masked a deeply disingenuous core. Everything about Mia was calculated. Her smile, her perfectly tousled hair, the way she spoke in trendy buzzwords, it was all a performance for an invisible audience. When I first proposed the retirement trip to Roman, Mia had immediately hijacked the planning process. I had suggested a cozy, historic tour of the Amalfi Coast. Mia had scoffed, sliding a meticulously curated Pinterest board across the dining table. Clara, no one wants to stay in some dusty old bed and breakfast, she had said, adjusting the sleeves of her designer sweater, a sweater I knew she had bought on credit. Dad deserves luxury. I'm thinking private villas, 5-star boutiques. Caleb is coming too, obviously. He's going to shoot some editorial content for my page while we're there. It'll be amazing exposure for him. I should have seen the red flags then. I should have recognized the way her eyes lit up not at the prospect of celebrating our father, but at the idea of the aesthetic backdrops the trip would provide. Caleb, a tall, perpetually smirking 27-year-old who wore sunglasses indoors, had merely nodded, adding, "Yeah, the natural light in Tuscany is crucial for my current portfolio. We'll need the master suite, Clara, for the equipment." I had fought them on the budget initially, but Roman had intervened, his voice soft and pleading. "Please, Clara, let her have this. You know how much her career means to her. I'll pay you back my half, and Mia will pay you back hers when her sponsorships come through." So I had relented. I had spent countless evenings negotiating with foreign hoteliers, arranging exclusive dinner reservations, and securing first-class lounge access. I poured my own safety net into the deposits, driven by a desperate, foolish desire to just have one perfect, harmonious family experience before Roman got too old to travel. And now, they were standing in a boarding line, sipping overpriced coffee, laughing about how they had ditched the Grinch. They were expecting a seamless, lavish experience. They were expecting to walk into five-star lobbies and hand over my confirmation numbers to smiling concierges. I sat down at the kitchen island and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dark kitchen. I logged into my corporate travel portal. My fingers didn't shake. The migraine that had been blinding me just an hour ago had completely vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp, and terrifying clarity. They wanted to travel without me. I was going to make sure they got exactly what they asked for. The glow of my laptop screen felt incredibly bright against the dim, early morning shadows of the kitchen. I stared at the main dashboard of my corporate travel portal, a highly secure platform I utilized daily for my logistics firm. Because I had organized this elaborate vacation through my executive account to secure the best possible corporate rates and VIP upgrades, every single itinerary item was inextricably tied to my professional profile. They had forgotten one crucial thing, the very cornerstone of my career. I do not leave loose ends. The terms and conditions for these specific high-tier corporate bookings were incredibly strict. They required the primary account holder, me, to be physically present at check-in with the matching corporate card and a valid matching passport. Furthermore, any modifications, including adding a secondary guest as the lead name, required a two-factor authentication process that only my phone and my biometric fingerprint could approve. Mia, in her desperate rush to curate a visually perfect, stress-free departure, had fundamentally misunderstood how adult responsibilities actually functioned. She assumed travel was as simple as showing up and acting entitled. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a sudden, sharp energy. I clicked on the first tab, Airfare. They were currently somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, sipping complimentary champagne in the premium economy seats I had painstakingly upgraded for them. I selected the return flights from Rome to New York, scheduled for 3 weeks from today. A warning prompt popped up, glowing a harsh yellow on the screen. Are you sure you want to cancel these non-refundable corporate tickets? Penalty fees will apply. I didn't even blink. I clicked Confirm Cancellation. The loading circle spun for 3 agonizing seconds before a green checkmark appeared. The return flights were gone. Poof, erased from the system. Next, I moved to the accommodations. The crown jewel of Mia's planned aesthetic content was a breathtaking 5-star boutique hotel in the heart of Paris, featuring balconies that overlooked the Eiffel Tower. I had paid €4,500 for 3 nights in their grand suite. I clicked on the reservation. Cancel booking. Green checkmark. I proceeded systematically, mercilessly, through the entire meticulously crafted itinerary. The private car transfer from Charles de Gaulle Airport. Cancelled. The guided skip-the-line tour of the Louvre. Cancelled. The luxury villa in Tuscany that Caleb had demanded for his natural light photography. Cancelled. The private cooking class in Florence. Cancelled. With every click of the mouse, another piece of their stolen, fraudulent fantasy evaporated into the digital ether. By the time the digital clock on my microwave flashed 7:30 a.m., I had dismantled a €14,200 European vacation down to absolutely nothing. They were currently flying toward a continent where they had no beds, no cars, and no return tickets. But as I sat there, the initial rush of adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a colder, more analytical curiosity. Why was Roman so quick to agree to this? My father was a passive man, certainly, but abandoning me on the morning of his own retirement trip felt unusually callous, even under Mia's heavy influence. I opened a new tab and logged into the secure server where I managed Roman's retirement transition documents. As his designated financial proxy, I had access to his primary checking and money market accounts to help him organize his pension and Social Security deposits. I had rarely checked them in the past few months, trusting that he was living within the comfortable budget we had established. I clicked on his recent transaction history, and my blood ran ice cold. The screen was a sea of red withdrawals. It wasn't just small, everyday purchases. There were massive, inexplicable wire transfers. Transfer $2,500 to C. Davis. Caleb, transfer $3,200 to C. Davis. Caleb again. Payment, $1,800 to Elite Social Media Management. I dug deeper, downloading the raw PDF statements and cross-referencing the dates. Over the last 6 months, while I was working 60-hour weeks to fund this vacation, Caleb had siphoned nearly $15,000 from my father's emergency money market account. And Mia? The brand deals she had been boasting about at Sunday dinners were entirely fictitious. The Elite Social Media Management charge was a known bot farm service. She was literally using Roman's retirement savings to buy fake followers and artificial engagement to maintain the illusion of her successful influencer lifestyle. They hadn't just left me behind because I was moody. They had left me behind because they knew that 3 weeks in close quarters would inevitably expose the fact that Mia and Caleb were flat broke and actively bleeding our father dry. They needed me out of the picture so they could continue to control him, isolated in a foreign country without my watchful eye. I leaned back in my chair, the silence of the empty house pressing against my ears. The trap was set, but now the stakes were entirely different. This wasn't just about a ruined vacation anymore. This was about saving my father from a pair of parasites. I spent the next 10 hours in a state of tranquil preparation. I showered, made myself a proper breakfast, and brewed a pot of high-grade jasmine tea. I organized the printed bank statements into neat, undeniable stacks on the dining room table. I knew the exact schedule of their flight. I knew exactly when they would land, how long it would take them to get through customs, and how long they would stand at the baggage carousel. At precisely 4:15 p.m. local time, my phone screen illuminated with an incoming FaceTime call. The contact photo was a heavily filtered picture of Mia posing on a yacht. I took a slow sip of my tea, savoring the warmth, and swiped to accept the call. The screen flickered, revealing the opulent, marble-pillared lobby of the Parisian boutique hotel. The contrast between the luxurious surroundings and the sheer, unadulterated panic on my sister's face was cinematic. Mia's perfectly styled hair was frizzing at the edges, and her heavy makeup looked slightly smeared under the warm lobby lights. Behind her, Roman looked pale and exhausted, sitting heavily on a pile of designer luggage. Caleb was pacing furiously near a towering floral arrangement, arguing aggressively with a stern-looking French concierge. "Clara!" Mia shrieked the moment my face appeared on the screen. Her voice echoed sharply off the marble walls, causing several well-dressed guests to turn and stare. "What did you do? What is wrong with you?" "Hello, Mia," I said, my voice smooth, quiet, and completely devoid of the hysteria she was projecting. "How was the flight? You look a bit stressed for someone on a curated luxury tour." "Don't play games with me," she screamed, her eyes wide with frantic rage. "We've been standing here for 45 minutes. The concierge is saying the reservation doesn't exist. He's saying it was canceled this morning. Caleb has a brand shoot scheduled at the Louvre tomorrow, Clara. Fix this right now. Give me the confirmation code." "There is no confirmation code to give you, Mia," I replied, leaning slightly closer to the camera so she could see the absolute lack of sympathy in my eyes. The reservation was canceled, just like the flight back home, just like the villa in Tuscany, just like the private cars. I assumed that since I was too much of a dark cloud to accompany you, you had made your own, independent arrangements." Mia gasped, her mouth falling open in a perfect O of horror. You canceled the whole trip. Are you insane? Dad, listen to what she's saying." She shoved the phone roughly toward Roman. My father looked into the camera, his eyes red-rimmed from the long flight and deep confusion. "Clara, sweetheart, please tell me this is a misunderstanding. The man at the desk is being very rude. He says they are completely booked and we have to leave the premises. We don't have anywhere to sleep tonight." "It's not a misunderstanding, Dad," I said, keeping my tone firm but respectful when addressing him. "I booked everything under my corporate executive account. The terms are non-negotiable. If I am not physically standing at that desk with my biometric ID and my corporate credit card, the reservations are automatically flagged as fraudulent and voided." Since you all decided to sneak out of the house at 4 in the morning and leave me a sticky note instead of having an adult conversation, I was forced to notify the portal that I would not be traveling. Suddenly, Caleb's face shoved its way into the frame, completely blocking Roman. His designer sunglasses were pushed up onto his forehead, and his face was twisted in an ugly, entitled sneer. "Listen to me, you miserable, jealous spinster," Caleb spat, pointing a finger directly at the camera lens. "You are going to call this hotel right now, you are going to give them your credit card number over the phone, and you are going to fix this. Do you have any idea how much money we are losing right now? My time is valuable. If you don't sort this out, I will personally sue you for breach of contract and emotional distress. I have a lawyer on retainer." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a genuine, echoing laugh that bubbled up from the sheer absurdity of his empty threats. A lawyer on retainer. I asked, a wide smile spreading across my face. "That's fascinating, Caleb, because I was under the impression that you couldn't even afford your own rent for your art studio last month. Does your imaginary lawyer take payment in stolen retirement funds?" The effect of my words was instantaneous. Caleb's smug sneer vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, deer-in-the-headlights terror. He visibly recoiled from the phone, glancing nervously over his shoulder at Roman, who was currently too exhausted to fully register the exchange. "I don't know what you're talking about," Caleb stammered, his voice dropping an octave as his false bravado crumbled. "I think you do," I said quietly, the smile dropping from my face completely. "Have fun in Paris, guys. I hear the benches by the Seine are lovely this time of year." I ended the FaceTime call, plunging the kitchen back into silence. The first strike had landed perfectly, but I knew the war was far from over. For the next 2 hours, my phone exploded. It rang constantly, lighting up with frantic text messages and missed calls. First, it was Mia, sending walls of text ranging from aggressive, profanity-laced insults to pathetic, weeping voice notes begging me to wire them money. Then Caleb tried calling from an unknown number, presumably a burner app, which I instantly blocked. I ignored all of it. I sat at my dining room table, drinking tea and watching the sun begin to set, casting long, dramatic shadows across the hardwood floor. I was waiting for one specific call, and I knew exactly when it would come. At 6:45 p.m., my phone buzzed. The caller ID simply read, "Dad." I let it ring 3 times before picking it up. "Hello, Dad." "Clara," Roman said. His voice was no longer hushed with forced gentleness. It was thick, trembling, and deeply broken. The background noise had changed. The echoing marble lobby was gone, replaced by the loud, chaotic roar of street traffic and sirens. They had been kicked out of the hotel. "Clara, please, I am begging you. We are standing on a street corner in a foreign city with 8 suitcases. It is getting dark. Mia is crying hysterically. Caleb's credit cards are all declining. Please just book us a room for the night. I will pay you back. I promise you, I will pay you back every single cent." I closed my eyes, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. This was the hardest part. I loved my father. Hearing the raw desperation in his voice physically hurt me, but I knew that if I caved now, if I sent them a lifeline, the cycle of manipulation would never end. I had to break the spell completely. "Dad, you can't pay me back," I said softly, my voice steady despite the ache in my throat. "Your card is declining because there is no money left in your emergency account." "What are you talking about?" Roman asked, his voice spiking with genuine confusion. "That's impossible. I have over $30,000 in the money market account. The bank must have put a travel freeze on it. I just need to call them." "I am looking at your statements right now, Dad," I interrupted, flipping open the top folder on the table. "You made me your financial proxy 2 years ago, remember. I logged in today. On March 12th, Caleb received a wire transfer of $3,200. On April 5th, another $2,500. On May 18th, $4,000 for what was labeled studio expansion. Have you been authorizing these transfers?" The line went dead silent. I could hear the faint sound of cars honking in Paris, but Roman wasn't speaking. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. "Dad," I prompted gently. Mia said he needed a short-term loan," Roman finally whispered, his voice sounding incredibly frail, like a hollowed-out shell of a man. She said his gallery opening was going to be huge, but he just needed some capital for the materials. She promised me it would be paid back by June. She said Caleb had investors. He doesn't have investors, Dad, I explained, maintaining a calm, objective tone. He doesn't have a gallery opening, and Mia doesn't have brand deals. I found the recurring charges for elite social media management. She has been using your retirement money to buy fake followers to make herself look successful online. They have drained nearly $15,000 from your accounts in 6 months. That's why they didn't want me on this trip. They knew I would ask questions. They knew I would expect them to pay for their own meals and their own shopping. They needed you isolated so they could keep using you as an ATM. No, Roman breathed, the denial automatic but entirely unconvincing. No, Clara, you must be misreading the statements. Mia wouldn't do that to me. She's my little girl. She wouldn't steal from me. You're just angry about the trip, and you're making things up to punish us. He was struggling. The cognitive dissonance was tearing him apart. It was easier to believe that his eldest daughter was a cruel, vindictive monster than to accept that his favored child was a manipulative parasite who viewed him as nothing more than a bank account. I'm not making anything up, I said quietly. I just emailed you the PDF files of the official bank statements. Open them, Dad. Look at the routing numbers. Look at the names attached to the wire transfers. Caleb's name is on every single one. And while you're looking at them, ask Caleb to show you the confirmation email from this supposed brand shoot at the Louvre. Ask Mia to log into her influencer platform and show you her revenue stream. Clara, please. Open the email, Dad, I insisted, my voice hardening. I love you, but I will not enable this any longer. You are stranded right now because you chose to follow a 24-year-old child and her con artist boyfriend instead of the daughter who actually takes care of you. I am not booking you a hotel. I am not sending you money. You need to look at those statements, confront the people standing next to you, and figure out your own way home. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button, ending the call. My hands were shaking slightly now, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving a cold, hollow exhaustion in its wake. I had given him the irrefutable proof. The evidence was in his inbox. Now, it was entirely up to him to decide whether he wanted to remain a victim or finally wake up to the truth. The climax of this disaster was approaching, and I knew that the real explosion wasn't going to happen over the phone, it was going to happen right there, on the streets of Paris. For the next 48 hours, the silence in my house was absolute. I did not receive any more calls from Paris. The frantic barrage of text messages from Mia completely ceased, and Caleb's burner numbers went dark. I knew, with the cold, calculating precision of my profession, exactly what was happening. They were experiencing the crushing, unglamorous reality of being completely financially stranded. I didn't spend those 2 days resting. I spent them preparing for the inevitable fallout. I knew that Roman, despite his depleted accounts, still had his physical passport and enough pride to seek out the American consulate. I also knew that because he had been the victim of fraud, the embassy would likely issue emergency repatriation loans to get them on a flight back to the United States. They were coming home, but they weren't going to walk into an empty house where they could spin their own twisted narrative. On Thursday evening, I invited Roman's older siblings, my Aunt Sarah and my Uncle David, over to the house. They were the family elders, the ones who had generously contributed several $1,000s to Roman's retirement fund as a gift. I didn't tell them about the canceled trip. I simply told them that there was a severe, immediate emergency regarding Dad's finances and that I needed them present. They arrived at 6:00 p.m., their faces lined with deep concern, sitting nervously on my living room sofa as I poured them coffee and asked them to wait. At exactly 7:45 p.m., the heavy, unmistakable sound of a diesel taxi engine rumbled up the driveway. I stood by the window, watching through the blinds. The three of them climbed out of the cab, looking absolutely destroyed. The glamorous, curated aesthetic Mia had been so desperate to capture was entirely gone. She was wearing the same wrinkled sweatpants she had likely slept in on an airport bench, her hair greasy and tied in a messy knot. Caleb looked pale and feral, dragging his expensive leather duffel bag across the concrete as if it weighed 100 pounds. And Roman looked like he had aged 10 years. His shoulders were slumped, his face hollow, his eyes cast down at the pavement. They unlocked the front door and stepped into the entryway, the heavy thud of their luggage echoing through the house. "Clara!" Mia shrieked the moment she crossed the threshold, her voice a grating, hysterical sob. She didn't see Aunt Sarah and Uncle David sitting in the darkened living room yet. She stormed straight toward the kitchen where I was standing, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You psycho, you absolute monster. We had to sleep on the floor of the airport. We had to beg for embassy tickets. Caleb's equipment was almost stolen. I am going to destroy you for this, do you hear me? I am going to the police." "You don't need to go to the police, Mia," I said calmly, stepping out of the kitchen and into the ambient light of the living room, gesturing to the sofa. "I'm sure Uncle David and Aunt Sarah would love to hear all about it right now." Mia froze, the color drained from her face so fast she looked vaguely ill. Caleb, who had been aggressively stomping down the hallway right behind her, stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in pure, unfiltered panic as he spotted the family elders. "Roman!" Uncle David stood up, his deep voice rumbling with authority and confusion. "What on earth is going on? Why are you back? And why is your daughter screaming about the airport?" Roman dropped his suitcase. It hit the hardwood floor with a heavy, defeated thud. He couldn't even look his brother in the eye. He just stared at his own shoes, his hands trembling at his sides. "Uncle David, Aunt Sarah, thank God you're here." Mia pivoted instantly, the tears flowing with practiced ease as she lunged toward them, attempting to play the victim. Clara had a complete mental breakdown. She canceled our entire retirement trip while we were in the air. She left us stranded in Paris with no money and no hotel out of pure, malicious jealousy. She tried to ruin Dad's life. "Is that true, Clara?" Aunt Sarah asked, her brow furrowed in disbelief, looking from my hysterical sister to my perfectly calm demeanor. "I did cancel the trip," I replied, my voice steady, projecting clearly across the room. I walked over to the coffee table, where I had placed 3 thick, neatly bound folders. I handed one to Uncle David and one to Aunt Sarah. But I didn't do it out of jealousy. I did it because I discovered that the people Dad was traveling with have been systematically robbing him blind for the last 6 months. "That is a lie," Caleb shouted, stepping forward, his hands balling into fists. He tried to puff out his chest, attempting physical intimidation. "You are slandering me, you crazy." "Step back, son," Uncle David barked, his voice cracking like a whip. He was a retired structural engineer, a large, imposing man who did not tolerate disrespect. Caleb instantly recoiled, shrinking back against the wall. "Open the folders," I instructed quietly. For 5 agonizing minutes, the only sound in the living room was the rustling of paper. Uncle David and Aunt Sarah traced the lines of the bank statements with their fingers, their eyes widening as they took in the sheer volume of the red withdrawals. I had highlighted every single wire transfer to Caleb's accounts. I had attached the receipts for the bot farm services Mia had purchased. I had even included a printed summary page showing the exact total of the stolen funds, $14,850. "Roman," Aunt Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of heartbreak and rising fury. She looked up from the papers, glaring at her younger brother. "Is this true? Did you authorize this boy to take $15,000 from your emergency fund?" Roman slowly raised his head. Tears were silently streaming down his weathered cheeks. He looked at Mia, who was shaking her head violently, silently pleading with him to cover for her. He looked at Caleb, who was glaring at the floor, sweating profusely. And then he looked at me. "No," Roman said, his voice breaking. It was the first time he had spoken since walking through the door. "No, Sarah, I didn't. They told me it was a short-term loan for his art business. They told me they had investors. I trusted them, and when Clara sent me these statements in Paris, when I finally looked at them, I asked Caleb to show me his gallery contract." Roman took a deep, shuddering breath, his fists clenching at his sides. The passive, conflict-avoidant man was finally gone, replaced by a father who had realized the depth of his own foolishness. He didn't have one, Roman continued, his voice growing louder, firmer. He never had one. There was no brand deal. There was no photo shoot. They used my life savings to fund a fake lifestyle on the internet, and they tried to isolate me in Europe so Clara wouldn't find out. They left my daughter behind because they knew she would protect me. Dad, please, Mia sobbed, dropping the aggressive act entirely and reverting to a panicked, pleading child. We were going to pay you back, I swear. My account is about to blow up. The sponsorships are coming. Shut up, Mia, Uncle David growled, tossing the folder onto the coffee table with a loud smack. He stood up, turning his fierce gaze onto Caleb. You have exactly 60 seconds to get your bags out of my brother's house before I call the police and report you for felony elder financial abuse. The collapse of their grand delusion was spectacular to witness. Faced with the undeniable threat of law enforcement and the imposing presence of Uncle David, Caleb's bravado completely shattered. He didn't try to defend Mia. He didn't try to claim it was a joint misunderstanding. Like the true coward he was, he immediately threw my sister under the bus. She made me do it. Caleb stammered, backing toward the front door, his hands raised defensively. Mia had my routing numbers. She set up the transfers from his laptop. I told her it was a bad idea, but she said he owed her for her childhood. I didn't want any part of this. You absolute liar. Mia screamed, her face twisting in genuine, horrified betrayal as the man she had stolen for turned on her in an instant. She grabbed his arm, but he violently shoved her away, grabbing his duffel bag and bolting out the front door into the dark street without looking back. Mia collapsed onto the floor, weeping hysterically, begging Roman to forgive her, begging Aunt Sarah to intervene. But the spell was broken. The golden child facade had been ripped away, leaving only the ugly, manipulative reality underneath. Pack your things, Mia, Roman said quietly. The anger had drained out of him, leaving only a profound, exhausting sorrow. You cannot stay here, not tonight, not until you figure out how you are going to repay every single cent you took from me. Dad, I have nowhere to go. Caleb took the car. She wailed. You're 24 years old, I interjected, stepping forward and crossing my arms. You have a phone full of thousands of followers. I'm sure one of them has a couch you can crash on, but you are leaving this house tonight. It took another hour of crying, pleading, and packing, overseen entirely by Uncle David, before Mia finally called a rideshare and left the property. The moment the taillights disappeared down the street, the heavy, oppressive tension that had plagued our family for years seemed to evaporate, leaving the house feeling lighter, cleaner. Later that night, after Aunt Sarah and Uncle David had gone home, promising to return the next day to help sort through the remaining paperwork, Roman and I sat alone at the kitchen island. I brewed us a fresh pot of jasmine tea, pouring him a cup in the quiet dimness of the room. He stared at the steaming liquid for a long time before he finally spoke. I am so sorry, Clara, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. He reached across the marble counter and covered my hand with his trembling one. I was blind. I was so terrified of losing her, of pushing her away, that I let her walk all over me. And worse, I let her walk all over you. You worked so hard for that trip. You sacrificed so much for me, and I abandoned you. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I need you to know how deeply ashamed I am. I looked at my father, seeing the genuine remorse etched into every line of his face. I squeezed his hand back. I forgive you, Dad, but things have to change. You can't be her safety net anymore. I know, he nodded resolutely. I know. The healing process wasn't instantaneous, but it was thorough. Over the next few weeks, I utilized my professional network to help Roman secure his future. My firm retained a brilliant, aggressive corporate lawyer named Elias, who agreed to look over Dad's case pro bono as a favor to me. Elias helped Roman officially freeze his compromised accounts, place hard locks on his credit, and file formal police reports against Caleb for wire fraud and elder abuse. Caleb, lacking the funds to hire the lawyer on retainer he had so proudly boasted about, found himself buried under a mountain of legal trouble, facing severe criminal charges that effectively ended his pretentious art career before it even began. Mia's downfall was less legal, but equally devastating. Cut off entirely from Roman's funds and kicked out of her shared apartment when Caleb defaulted on the rent, she was forced to abandon her influencer dreams. The last I heard from a mutual acquaintance, she had moved to a different state and was working a grueling, entry-level retail job, her perfectly curated Instagram feed abandoned and silent. As for me, the logistics firm gave me a substantial year-end bonus for securing a massive new shipping contract. With the money Roman slowly but steadily paid back to me from the sale of some old assets and my newly replenished savings, I decided to rebook the European trip. But this time, I didn't book 5-star boutique hotels for aesthetic photo shoots, and I didn't invite anyone who would complain about the itinerary. 6 months later, Roman and I sat on a small, sun-drenched balcony overlooking the Amalfi Coast. There were no cameras, no brand deals, and no manipulative demands. Just the warm Italian breeze, a plate of fresh pasta, and the quiet, hard-won piece of a family that had finally learned the true value of loyalty.